Hello everyone. Welcome to Teaching APICS Certification Courses, Best Practices, A Global Perspective. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few details with you. At the end of the presentation, we will save some time for question and answer session. If you look at the toolbar on the right of your screen, you'll see a questions box. To ask a question, simply type it in the designated box and select Send Question to Staff, and then select Send. You can do this at any time during the presentation. We will answer as many questions as we can today. Submitted questions will be consolidated, answered, and posted on apics.org in a Q&A document. Those of you viewing this program in a room with several participants may want to designate one person to type the questions from your group. In addition, this online event is being recorded. We will post the webinar audio and the PowerPoint slides along with the Q&A document on apics.org within 2 weeks of today's webinar, and we will email the link to everyone who has registered for this webinar. Feel free to share this link with other instructors and your APICS partner colleagues. Should you experience any technical difficulties during today's broadcast, please call GoToWebinar Tech Support at 800-263-6317 for U.S. and internationally call +001-805-617-7000. Okay, next slide, and we'll welcome everyone to this presentation. We're about to start the APICS webinar, Teaching APICS Certification Courses, Best Practices, A Global Perspective. This is the fourth in our 2018 APICS Instructor Development Series about instructional tools and resources to work with the APICS learning systems, specifically the new social online tools in the 2018 learning systems. In today's webinar, we are featuring some of our international instructors. So I'm happy to introduce the presenters for today's webinar, Samer Al-Madhoun, Rob Van Stratum, and Jose Lara. Samer is a supply chain practitioner that enjoys 25 years of experience in various business sectors with emphasis on supply chain management and a core of experience. Samer has delivered over 3,000 hours of training, among which more than 2,000 hours are APICS related. Samer was the winner of the 2017 APICS Award of Excellence for the massive contribution to women in supply chain education in the Middle East. Rob is the owner of Supply Chain Education, SRO, and an international APICS partner in Czechoslovakia and Slovakia. He is on the following APICS committees: Director of AEP SCCR Supply Chain Education and APICS Risk Sensing Subcommittee, a member of the IDP Distance Learning Task Force, and an APICS CPIM SME. Rob is retiring from Eindhoven University of Applied Sciences, and he teaches APICS courses throughout Europe, both face-to-face and online. Jose Lara is an industrial engineer and holds an MBA. He worked as an operations manager in the oil and agricultural industries from 1981 to 1987 prior to joining Ernst & Young as a consultant in the area of supply chain management. In 1996, he started teaching APICS courses, and he has done continuously since then, primarily in Central and South America. Some of his clients have included ExxonMobil Brazil, Chiquita Panama, General Motors Argentina, Procter & Gamble, Unilever Colombia, Tetra Pak, and many, many others. Jose is the director of AEP CAPI CAPICS in Costa Rica. So welcome, Sam, Rob, and Jose. And Samer, will you start us off, please?
Thank you, Bob, for the introduction, and I'm glad to be here to share some insights from my experience on using the learning system. Actually, in the past 10 years, I had been delivering APICS material, precisely CSCP more than the others, and I have witnessed how the material had been developing and how the learning system as well had been developing until we reached the last version of the online learning system. And I have to say that I'm impressed with the capabilities that the system is offering today to bring the education of CSCP to a live status. Today I'm going to talk about two main features that I use in the system and I find very beneficial for instructors. One of them on how to activate a flipped class activity using the online learning system. I'm going to explain what is a flipped class and how the system is helping me and my co-instructors delivering flipped class capability. And the second point I will highlight is the gaming with the flashcards at the class and how do I leverage that through the learning system. Next slide, please. So basically, what is a flipped class? If you had been, as an APICS instructor, if you ever had been to AIS class, probably you have heard and learned about flipping the class. If you had been to the supply chain channel, APICS supply chain channel, also you would have seen or read some of the comments there about flipping a class. The traditional way in which we use the class today is the instructor gets the chance to explain the material and the learning system, and then you would ask your learners to go online and answer the questions back home or whenever they have time. That's the traditional way of doing the classes. In the past recent years, a new approach had been developed, which is basically flipping the class, totally the opposite way around, in the sense of you give the learners the chance to prepare themselves, read the material, and so on, away from the class time, and you leverage the class time, putting more exercises, putting more case studies, discussing critical issues in the learning process itself. And this is pretty interesting because you might be wondering, why would I do that actually? If you look at the way that APICS have written, the committees have written the exam, the majority of APICS CSCP questions tackles from a Bloom taxonomy perspective, they tackle the application level rather than the knowledge level. But what we do actually at the class is discuss the knowledge in general. So when you flip the class as a technique, what really happens is that the learners would prepare themselves outside the class, and in the class you dedicate more time to discuss the application of S&OP, how to use it, answer questions around it, for example, and probably discuss a case study which enriches the knowledge of the learners to an application level that can benefit them technically at the workplace and at the same time to answer and pass exam questions. So this is one great feature of a flipping class. In addition to that, flipping class gives the learners the accountability for their learning process in general, so they would take care of that. Absent students are never left behind because they have a material to look at outside. Learners can repeat the reading and the videos as much as they can. Okay, so that's the general concept of flipped class. Now, what I want to show you around the learning system, how do I take this to the learning system? How do I leverage the features in the learning system? So what I will do actually is look at the features of the system. One of the features of the system is that I can send announcement to my learners today. That's one of the greatest features today of the learning system. So I would send my learners, I would use the learning system to send my learners the announcement for the class roster. In that announcement, I would tell them that they have to do some readings, they have to watch some videos, case studies. That's, if you look at this slide now, that's an example of an announcement. I'm sending class preparation for next week, where I ask my learners to prepare reading for the sustainability part and social responsibility. And with that, I ask them to view some online videos that I think are in the heart of the learning process, and probably a link to read an article about sustainability. Okay, so the learners gets the chance to meet me next week prepared with some skimming, reading videos, and I send this, I publish this as you see and update it and send it to everyone. The learners will get notifications that they have some tasks to do, and they would prepare themselves for that. Next slide, please. Then basically during that week or during the couple days, no matter how do you span your class over time, the learners have a great feature to ask the instructor through the learning system. So if anything they don't get out of the material that I have sent them to read or look at, they can simply go to the online learning system and press ask the instructor, and immediately I would get a notification message about certain things that they didn't get in the readings material or in the book or in the videos that they see, and I would be happy to answer them and elaborate more around the time that we don't meet actually. Okay, so now the learners are more prepared, have read the material and skimmed over it, and we are ready to meet again in the class, but this time to discuss more case studies, application level education, rather than knowledge level. Next slide, please. As you see, now another great feature that's in the system, and I would urge all APICS instructors to have a look at it, is the case study and the activities that's built inside the system. APICS have developed the 3D case study, and basically the 3D case study at CSCP material goes with every single module that you teach as an instructor. So since I have asked them to prepare sustainability material, and they have read about GRI and the United Nations Global Compact and the social responsibility, all these features, it's now time to discuss more technical issues at the class itself. For example, you would download the 3D mall case study for the sustainability, spend some time with them. You are allowed to print that. It's an activity for everyone, or you probably want to open the system directly, and you have them reading the case study information, and the case study has questions about it, okay, where you can guys go discuss together the technicalities of this question, so they would raise their understanding of sustainability in this case to a higher level than just the regular knowledge. I would also share a case study from the Global Reporting Initiative. I would share with them or read with them a sustainability report from one of the companies that they know, and there they get to understand the technicalities behind the sustainability reporting in general. Okay, that's one great feature. Now I know most of you would think how hard or easy it is to flip a class. It's not easy at all, and you are not required to flip the entire educational material, but it's worth trying. I personally flip 2 to 3 times in a CSCP class in general, and it gets great results. I can see great results from the understanding of the learners for the CSCP material. Okay, that's just for the greatest advantage here also for flipping the class. Actually, you have to take into consideration, you ask yourself, you need to set the expectation from the very beginning that you are flipping a class with the learners and they have to prepare for that. You have to ask yourself what materials will move outside the classroom, so you would take it into their consideration. What is the delivery method that should be used for that? Are there any hardware or software needed? What activities will replace that in the lecture? All these, you have to answer this question before you start flipping your class. That's one great technique. If you look at the next slide, please. Another technique that I use is basically creating, sometimes learners gets bored and they come from work, they're very tired. It's always great to create gaming inside the class. So whenever you feel that your learners are starting to get bored of the current class, you can start gaming by using the flashcards. The learning systems comes with great flashcards that is printable, and you are allowed to print them, and the learners are allowed to print them. So basically, you can print those flashcards. They come in different formats, and you can flip those flashcards to create a gaming where learners can see the definition, but they cannot see the term behind that. And then you ask the learners to try to read the definitions in the flashcards and try to figure out what would be term behind that. And they will spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes playing around that. While doing so, they learn from the definition, they learn from their mistakes. Then you ask them to flip the paper to see if they matched the term that's underneath the definition by itself. Let me show you where do you get that from the system. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's the CSCP learning system. And if you go to resources part, you can easily go there and download printable flashcards. And basically you click which one of these you want to have, probably the double-sided option or the A4 paper and so on. You print them, you prepare them per module. They are in an alphabetical format, and you can use them for happy learning. That's it for me. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, sorry, Samir. Thank you. We do appreciate that. I'm noticing some questions coming in. We'll get to them after the three of you are done. So, Rob, if you'd like to pick up the next one, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Bob. Very interesting what Samir told us, and I can only say that he's completely right in flipping the classroom. That is the way how students like to learn. I would like to discuss the commonalities between the three learning systems that are available right now from the CSCP, which has been around for more than 10 years. Then the CPIM that popped up several years ago, and recently, of course, the CLTD. Well, I can say to you, if you know one system, you know them all. It's the proverbial piece of cake, because they are exactly the same. They have all the same functionalities. Ask the instructor, discussion, a lot of multiple choice questions, case studies, flip the terms, and so on and so forth. So there is no escape. You know one, you know them all. Because I was an assistant professor at this University of Applied Sciences that Bob already told you, I've also ample experience with other learning systems or content management systems of combinations. Learning systems like Blackboard and Moodle and Canvas. And in my opinion, the current state of the learning systems of APICS is state of the art. We are completely comparable with the big and the most used LMSs in the academic world. And there already has been a recap of those functionalities. I would like to add on what Samir said, the learning analytics, which are quite interesting to reveal how much and what your students actually are doing. And it gives you some opportunity to hint them in the classroom that they should really start with the study. There is synchronous and asynchronous communication, so you can speak to them right on the spot, or they can send you a message that you can answer later. It's one-to-one or one-to-many. And of course, in my opinion, one of the most important things is to prepare the students for the exam by let them study material and then immediately do the progress checks and the module and the section quizzes. And of course, the other things that the Samir already made clear to us. Next slide, please, Bob. So, how have I been using the learning system? Well, I have to say, in the European theater of operations, I usually have the format that there is a kind of a blended class with 2 times 2 days of instruction. So we start on the Monday, Tuesday, and then they go home, and then they come back the next week, and we have another Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, or we do it at the end of the week. So we have a Thursday, Friday, a week off, and then Thursday, Friday. The reason for this is that many students have very busy jobs, and they don't are allowed to go away from their desks more than 2 days. Otherwise, the company would be in a mess. So it's classroom instruction and then monitored self-study. I must say that many students are so busy that they are not able to prepare completely in the flipped way. I have some experience with this, and when you ask students to prepare things up front, then you usually end up with a class from 10 students, and 5 of those students did prepare anything, and the other 5 didn't. And then what do you have to do? Well, at university, you could still, of course, say to the freshmen, the first year students, that they should prepare, or else. But you can't say this to grown-up people that are supply chain hotshots. So you have to be aware that in many cases there is no preparation. So completely applying the flipped classroom paradigm is not possible. But you can ask them, for instance, when they start to study, to do the pretest and to create a smart study plan. So that's what I always do by sending several emails, and I try to highlight the advantages. When you have a smart study plan, you know your strong points, your weak points. There is a deadline. You can make a plan, and you can plan the walk and walk the plan. And if you don't make a plan, etc., etc. So that helps. And then the first time I see the students, I discuss 1 or 2 smart study plans in the class that give the other ones the opportunity to see that it actually works, and they like to see it. On top of this, in many cases, students like to discuss a little bit about their personal background, and that they are very busy, and that they have a family with children, and this discussion could be interesting and stimulating and very relevant for the students. They are not alone with their worries. Next slide, Bob. So then you monitor progress. I strongly stimulate, like I already told, the use of the module in the section quizzes. And from time to time, I do some 10 questions in the class as well. They like to discuss how the questions should be answered. Of course, this asks some, let's say, courage of the instructor, because you don't know the answer up front. There are more than 800 questions, and sometimes it can be a little bit confronting if you are not directly going to the right answer, but that's how life is. Of course, you can take the practice exam in the class, and that's all I do. I launched some discussions, but like I told you, they don't have the time. What I also see is that as the instructor is seldom used, the students immediately start to launch a WhatsApp group, and they like to ask questions to each other in the WhatsApp group, and I'm usually part of this group, and they like to have short questions and very quick answers. Next slide, please, Bob. What also helps is that you realize that in many cases the students are mid-level or senior supply chain hotshots. They have a narrow field of experience that they are very good at, and together 10 of those hotshots know more of the supply chain than you are. But that doesn't matter. You are there to give the overview, and especially to encourage discussion and to link the APICS body of knowledge to their operations. So also important is to say to them that they shouldn't try to answer the bombardment of emails that keep coming throughout the class. They should close the laptops and pay attention. And my last remark is that in an international class, it pays off to know what exact nationalities you have there. And when you have multiple nationalities, it pays off to spend some time on the national specific supply chain aspects of each country. For instance, right now, the Brexit is a very hot topic, and you can ask other countries to comment if they are harmed when the borders of the UK and the EU will be closed. What will be the supply chain aspects for that phenomenon and documentation? Swiss are usually also very interested. I noticed that Czechs and Slovaks like to talk about the employability. They have thousands of empty jobs, So they need desperately supply chain knowledge, and that's also a big challenge over there. So that's for now my contribution. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Rob. We do appreciate that. And now, Jose, if you would wrap things up for us.
And I'm going to try to add to what Samir and Rob have said. I'm aware that some of you might have been teaching for a while, and I'm going to try to share my experience, which you might find familiar. So I'm thinking about 2 points here. The first one is that with the years, I've come to realize the importance of knowing your audience and preparing for it. It should not be a surprise who's sitting there listening to you and participating in the class. So the first thing would be, why are you here? For example, a person could be there just to pass the exam. And this kind of person wants to know how to face the problem. That's all the person wants to know. He or she is required to pass the exam, and well, they want to know how to answer the question. That's one kind of person. Also, when it's required by the company, it's even more stressful, because then the person is just asking, you know, if they ask me this, what am I supposed to answer? And traditionally, you're not supposed to address those questions directly. You're supposed to refer to the body of knowledge. So you have to know if the person is looking for one of these things. What I like best is the person is looking for personal development, because then you can really dive into the body of knowledge and have a very interesting discussion in class, and time flies. So this is the best situation. But of course, the thing is, you have to know who is sitting there and what do they want. Another specific type of group is the one that is looking to prepare for the implementation of an ERP. And then this is another interesting one, because if you know more or less how they work, then you are able to bring up problems that the group is going to face during the implementation of the system. And this is really helpful for the person that is sitting there. So the thing is that it is a very good idea to find out who is going to be sitting in your class, and then to prepare for that class. It gives a very good impression. The person that is sitting there feels that you're thinking about his or her interests. And it is a very nice thing. Okay, next slide, please. Another part of preparing for your audience, where does the person come from within the organization where he or she works? And here you're looking to avoid, first of all, the problem of having to talk about forecasting to a group that comes from purchasing, for example. In college, you have to learn everything they teach you to get your degree, period. But with a group that is looking to be certified CPIM or CSCP or whatever, they are looking to know something about their own jobs. So if you're teaching forecasting to a person that comes from purchasing, for example, the person might not find it relevant. So you have to know what your audience is to see where you you emphasize, what you emphasize. It's very important to know that. I wanted to share a story. I visited an oil company once, very large, and I had to teach the basics course. And it turned out that everybody in the room was from purchasing. So, you know, most of the course they were not very interested in, and some of it they did not understand why they had to know this. So, you know, you want to avoid this awkward situation. What should I have done? I should have called much before and asked, who's going to be in the room? Where do they come from? Are they manufacturing, purchasing, planning? This is a very, very good practice, and I think you should never start the course without knowing where the people come from. Next slide, please. Well, another thing is, what type of industry does the people come from? And this expression that I wrote down on the slide, we do not release production orders in an oil refinery. Well, imagine teaching MRP to a group of people from ExxonMobil, Brazil, who work in a refinery and who never ever release orders, because you don't do that in an oil refinery. They don't know what you're talking about, and why would you ever do that? So if you're going to go there, well, you have to at least explain that this is for your general knowledge, but you're not going to do this in your job. And even more, maybe before the course, you should tell your customer, your client, that they would probably be more interested in continuous flow scheduling or some other part of the APICS body of knowledge that addresses their specific problems. This is sometimes hard to do because the company, if it's a company you're teaching to, the company wants something specific. They've already allocated their budget to CPIM or CSCP, and they just want to do that. So you have to be very tactful in trying to direct them to the best thing they can get from APICS. Okay, next slide, please. Another thing, what happens when you're talking about specific formulas for I don't know, lot sizes or formulas for forecasting, and you find out that in the classroom there are VPs and C-level people, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Officer, CEO, and they all of a sudden start taking out their phones because they're not interested in those details. But they are surely interested in other things. For example, are our products going to become obsolete? How much money we're spending on purchasing? And that all comes from decisions that people make in planning, in purchasing, in manufacturing. So you have to tie the results for the company in terms of financial results to what the people are doing down there or back there in the back office in planning or manufacturing or purchasing. That is a difficult feat. That is not so easy, but you would have to prepare for that. And again, ask who's going to be in the classroom, because if this is the case, well, it's a completely different speech you're going to have to do in the classroom. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the second point. Make the content come alive. what is the relevance to you of all this that we're talking about? That's something you have to address, because again, these people are working people. They're not college students. They want to know how this affects me in my job. And then you have to face some down-to-earth realities. For example, you might take a course in learning styles, and it's very interesting, really very interesting. The thing is, after learning this, what do you do with it in the classroom? It's good that you know it, but what do you do with it? So, second point, the audience wants to know that the instructor is knowledgeable. Otherwise, well, buy the book, take it home, and study. But the people really want to know that the person that's standing there and getting paid for this knows what he's talking about. Has he ever implemented an MRP system, for example? Can I ask him what kind of problems I'm going to have when I do? Well, you better, because it makes the course much more interesting. And the third point, we learn best through interesting questions and stories. But then again, you have to have the stories. And listening to Rob and Samer, I think that we can take advantage of everything that is documented in the learning system, because there are stories and questions and other things there that we can use for that. Therefore, next slide, please. Therefore, make the content alive through stories and challenging questions about the real problems in the workplace. So, tell the problem. Maybe you have a story that you have gone through in a real situation. Let the people try to figure out how to fix this. Maybe they do not know what we're going to talk about next, hopefully. But then you can say, okay, this is the way the problem is solved. And you take out your APICS slide and offer the solution. I am going to share with you several examples. Again, I'm aware that many of you have probably gone through similar problems in your jobs or in the classroom, but bear with me and let me share a few of them of my own. Next slide, please. I was once in a meeting of a sales and operations planning exercise, executive meeting, and the CEO of the company all of a sudden said, for make-to-order products, the forecast must be 100% accurate always. So I took this to the classroom, by the way, in the same company, and I said, what did he really want to say? Because this is not exactly what he wanted to say. So what is the point here? What he really wanted to say is that if we are ordered 100 units, we must deliver everything complete. He did not want to say that the forecast should be 100% accurate always. This is almost impossible. So after a short discussion about what he really meant, maybe somebody in the classroom will guess, then let's start talking about what is this thing called a forecast? And why do we have to forecast in a make-to-order environment? Shouldn't we just sit down and wait for the order? Well, if we are going to promise a lead time, we better have some raw material. And then we would have to forecast to see how much we have. So this sometimes is magical for the person sitting there, because all of a sudden the person says, oh, okay, I got it. Now, so this is something you might want to practice and even rehearse before the class, because it actually makes the content come alive. Next slide, please. Okay, this example is about a pharmaceutical company. A salesperson traveled to another country and offered the social security system of that other company 15,000 units to be delivered next week. He comes from a bigger pharmaceutical company, so he thinks, the salesperson thinks, that we have more than enough product. And this usually happens in pharmaceutical companies because there the margins are so high that it's better to have more than enough. But in this case, we did not have. So I tell the story, and then I ask what could have been done differently. Well, he could have asked how much we have, but not only that, he could have asked how much we have now and what is our production plan, because that will tell you how much more we're going to have in the future. And you can promise that too. And maybe the customer does not want to have everything next week. Maybe he wants to have partial deliveries and also, of course, pay partially as he gets the product. Okay, given the problem, now let's talk about available to promise. So when you go through the slides, it becomes really, really clear what available to promise is. And somebody might say in the classroom, so you can promise the inventory you have now and you can promise your production plan? Yes, of course, you can do that. Now, of course, it depends on your technology, because you may not have the technology to do this. And then you might throw something else. For example, can you imagine available to promise in consumer goods, for example, in a Coca-Cola truck? Can you imagine the person delivering the beverage saying, I can deliver this today and I can promise you that tomorrow? So, you know, this should provide for some lively discussion in class. Next slide, please. Okay, I was in a classroom once in Brazil, and we were planning on implementing an MRP system, and the budget was in the millions of dollars. And somebody back there, a very young person, 20-something, said, we buy 5 things, only 5. Why would we spend so much money on an MRP system to buy 5 things? I can do that with my Excel sheet. He said, our real problem is capacity, because our machines are too expensive. So why don't we implement a capacity management system and tie that to our scheduling in our 7 plants, and let the system decide where the product can be built. So this serves the purpose of establishing the ground to start talking about MRP. When is MRP good and when is it not? How can you use it to provide a benefit for the company? This is another example I just wanted to share, because, you know, this is a very good experience. Next slide, please. I was talking to a person in the same company, and I asked, how much capacity do we have? And the lady asked, well, she said, it depends. How much do we have to produce? And that relates to a part of the capacity management session in CPIM part 1. It sometimes becomes awkward because it says there that planning for capacity is not the same as controlling capacity. Sometimes the participant looks at you like if he was saying, well, isn't it the same thing? Well, no, it isn't, because one thing it is to define how many shifts you have, how many people and machines, and another thing it is to compare that with how much work do we have to do. So you might use an example like this to explain that planning is not the same as controlling, and that comparing both is a thing that has to be done. Next slide, please. And this last example that I want to share, and maybe you've been through this before. Whenever you're talking, for example, about cardboard boxes or glass, it's an interesting thing that the suppliers of these materials are, most of the time they're late, and you wonder why. Usually they tell you that they're going to deliver on the date that you want, but they're not thinking that they can do this, because the truth is that they're going to go back to their office and ask the plant when they can deliver, once they have already promised the date to the customer. Why is that? Because the company wants to maximize the use of their machinery. They're not really so much interested in delivering on time. So that is a very good introduction to finite forward capacity planning, because this is what they actually use. They're not on backward infinite, they're forward finite. And then you can explain with this example that for them to be able to provide the price they're offering their customers, they need to be able to program and schedule their machines as best fits their own interests. If the client would ask that their product was delivered on a certain date, they would have to say, well, I would have to charge you more, and they don't want to do that. So this is a good example to mention before the discussion about finite forward. I've shared with you 5 examples, but of course, some of you may have many more. I just wanted to make the point that it is very important to make the content come alive with examples, stories, and sometimes you have to use some jokes or something to make people relate to this material. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. We do have a little time left for Q&A. We do have some questions already, but we'll also ask if you have additional questions to go ahead and add them. Remember that all the questions, even if we don't get to them verbally today, will be collected and answered and provided with the recording of this webinar and the slides. So feel free to continue to ask questions. Samar, there are a couple here relating to some of the things that you talked about. One was in regard to instructors asking if they have access to the platform where the course menu is presented, the flashcards, etc. And I believe all the instructors have access to that. Is that correct?
Correct. All instructors can go to the course contents from the online learning systems, and from there click on references and download flashcards, and just have them downloaded and printing them out. And that's legally, from copyright's perspective, that's legally okay, I believe, because they are meant to be actually. Sure. So they can do that from the learning system, of course.
And if instructors having trouble accessing that, they should contact their representative at Holmes, who can make sure that they're properly set up online and so on. Another one wants to know, Samer, when an instructor publishes a question on the online learning system, does the participant receive the message from the learning system informing them that there is a new announcement available?
Yes,
how do they know
they
to look?
Yeah, they do immediately notification that they have an announcement on the system that they need to look at, and that would make it easier for them to get access immediately and read the announcement. So it's with the new system, with the new learning system, it's easier than ever to create this communication.
Great, great. Samer and Rob, both of you talked about flipped classroom, and there's certainly benefits and challenges for the flipped classroom. One of the instructors asked, how do you prepare students for flipped class and ensure that they properly prepare?
Well, that's the big question, because in my experience, they don't. So if you are supposing that all students are preparing themselves, you will find yourself in a class where half of the students didn't. And then you have a problem. If you are going to treat the class as if they all did prepare, then the people that did not are angry. But if you are treating the class if they didn't prepare anything, then the people that did prepare are also angry. So that is a big limitation on flip the classroom with busy professionals.
My personal experience with that is that the greatest trick here is that you need to set the expectation from the start at the beginning of the CSCP session, communicate it officially and through the learner's instructor agreement that we are going to have a flipped class. Prepare yourself in the 5th week, in the 7th week, whatever. We are going to do this exercise. Please mark this material. Try as much as you can to prepare yourself. And every single week, I would come back and remind them that we have a flipped class in that week. Make sure you look at the material. So you mentally prepare them that they have a commitment, and it's created in the learner-instructor agreement.
There's also something that a master instructor that I know quite well told me last year when we were talking about a similar topic. She said basically she tells people that at the beginning of the class she tries to set those expectations that there's a certain amount of work they'll have to do outside the classroom in order to benefit from the class. But they don't really have to do that because there will be places for them in her next class after they fail the exam. So if they want to do that, they can do that instead. So it's kind of a little bit of a backward type of approach, but I always like that. There was another interesting question about just looking how best to flip a class. Are there any clear examples available? Anything that any of the three of you want to add to this one? We can certainly add some more later in the written version.
I have a very good experience flipping the sustainability part of CSCP, and it works very well for me. One of my co-instructors, Walid Saad, last week he flipped the material handling equipments part in CSCP, and it went very well actually. But as I said, and as Rob said as well, not everyone comes prepared, but you try as much as you can to do that. And I personally like the 3D mall activities because they are already made available on the system for you to use them as a case study in this case.
Yeah.
Very good. Jose, someone was really interested when you were showing the different types of learners and trying to determine who your audience is. They ask, what happens if your audience is a mix of all the types described, like several industries or departments or different levels within the organization? How do you adapt to a diverse audience?
Yes, this can actually be a good thing. For example, if your audience consists of people from different functional areas in the company, sometimes this lends itself to a very productive situation in which you talk about the different topics in the courseware, but then you get them talking to each other. For example, the sales people do not want to forecast. I've had that once. What they say is, I'm here to sell, not to forecast. So I asked the people in operations, well, how do you purchase raw material if you don't know how much you have to purchase? So the people answer, yes, I know. We've had this problem for years. And then I ask, isn't there a better way to do this? And this leads to a very, very good discussion, very productive for the company. The problem is this. If you do this often, the course takes twice as long. That is the only problem. And then if you have people from a very high level in the company and people from lower levels, it is a very good thing to make the people from the higher levels understand the people from the lower levels and vice versa, because this creates better communication. At the end, the thing is that these situations lend themselves to trying to establish a better line of communication between functions or organization levels. And there's a value added in the course other than just the subject matter. So I think that's a great question, because I was not thinking about that, but in effect, you know, it's a great situation and a great opportunity, in fact.
You're right. Very good. Thank you, Jose. We're kind of running out of time. That is the time we have for questions today. We have some unanswered questions. We will get them answered in the Q&A document that will be posted with this webinar. Everyone that has registered will receive an email with the link. Feel free to share the link with other IDP instructors, your APICS partners, and chapter leaders. Next slide. So before we close, I wanted to share links for additional resources that our IDP instructors may find useful and follow some of the items discussed in today's webinar. All active IDP instructors should have access to the IDP Distance Learning Center through My APICS. I want to thank our presenters today. They've done a wonderful job. We've got a number of really nice comments in the questions box. Thank you for those who have appreciated what we've put together here. I do appreciate Samer, Rob's, and Jose's contributions. Thank you very much. And thank you all of you for, thank all of you for attending today and sending us your questions and comments. Have a great day, and we hope that you will attend the next webinar and workshop in our series. All content and materials included in this online event are the property of APICS and are protected by the United States and international copyright laws. All rights are reserved.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.